How's it going, guys? I'm the stock retro gamer, and we should talk about the Virtua Games. The Virtua Games are a series of arcade video games developed by the SEGA AM2 team. They covered a few genres like fighting games, racing games, light gun and sports titles. They were pioneering in their use of 3D polygonal graphics in their games, and in some cases were the first to use these within the genre. I'm going to talk about the big 4 games in the Virtua series that were pioneering in bringing gaming genres into the 3D world and did it in style. But first, some background. This all started with Yu Suzuki, a 25-year-old computer graphics designer who joined SEGA back in 1983 as a programmer. In his years to follow with SEGA, Suzuki would be responsible for some big titles such as Hang-On, Space Harrier and Outrun. I mean, he could have retired then if he wanted. After the success of these titles, he and his team relocated to Studio 128, a more private location where titles like Afterburner and Power Drift were developed. It was around this time that Toshihiro Nagoshi joined SEGA as a designer with Suzuki's team. This is when SEGA began to separate the amusement division into the Amusement Machine Research and Development teams, or AM teams. Suzuki was made General Manager of Research and Development No. 2, or AM2 for short. The stage was set, the talent was in place, but which game would be first? Released in 1992, Virtua Racing is a Formula 1 racing game and the first video game released by the SEGA AM2 dev team. The game had 3 circuits, which were also a different level of difficulty. Beginner was Big Forest, Intermediate was Bay Bridge, and Expert was Acropolis. When selecting a car, you could choose between manual and automatic transmission. Each circuit would have their own feature, such as the amusement park in Big Forest, or the suspension bridge in Bay Bridge. The game also gave you 4 viewpoints to choose from, letting you race from whichever angle you deem more comfortable. This was a game changer for racing games, and SEGA would use this in all subsequent games, such as Daytona USA, as would most racing games. The arcade was released in twin cabinets, so you could race your buddy right next to them. I think what was most jaw-dropping about Virtua Racing were the graphics. Virtua Racing used fully 3D graphics that could display 6,500 polygons per frame. That, coupled with the colours and the sharpness, just gave the game striking visuals, the likes no one had seen before. For me, it was the little things, the skid marks on the road and the sparks that shot up when you braked, that made this game great. The AM2 dev team used a Model 1 arcade system board to develop Virtua Racing, which took roughly 3 years with a team of 25 people. Virtua Racing was a worldwide commercial and critical success, winning several awards and being nominated for several more. Multiple gaming publications praised its use of 3D polygons. It's also found later success in ports, being ported to the Sega Mega Drive, Sega Saturn, and the 32X. Sega AM2 team had made their mark with a stunning, innovative, fun racing game, but they didn't rest on their laurels. They looked at what game genres were popular at the time and made their next move. Released in 1993, Virtua Fighter is a one-on-one tournament fighting game that lets you choose from up to 8 fighters. A mixture of men and women from different parts of the globe that use very different styles of martial arts. The combat in Virtua Fighter was more realistic and grounded, not opting for the superhuman fighting moves found in fighting games at the time. SEGA chose to use real-world fighting techniques and a dynamic camera that could zoom, pan, and swoop dramatically around the arena. Virtua Fighter would be the first martial arts fighting game that used flat-shaded 3D polygons, rendered in real time, giving players a graphical experience they couldn't get with a sprite-based game. AM2 used 3D motion capture technology for the animations. The hardware used for development was jointly AM2 Studios and Aerospace Simulation Tech by a company known as Lockheed Martin. The AM2 team had difficulties achieving the 3D operations. Suzuki said, "We were working away with craftsmanship, equivalent to inscribing 100 words on a single grain of rice." Virtua Fighter became Sega's best-selling arcade of all time, surpassing the previous record held by Outrun. It got scores in the 90% range by nearly all gaming publications and won several awards. Of course, it was ported to the Sega Saturn, where along with Virtua Fighter Remix, an updated version of the game sold more than 1 million copies. Next Generation magazine said it was arguably the most significant game of the 1990s. It would go on to have 4 main sequels and several spin-offs, and would inspire future fighting games like Soul Calibur and the Tekken series. So, AM2 had done racing games and fighting games in style. Which arcade-based genre were they going to take on next? Something with more bang? Released in 1994, Virtua Cop is a light gun rail shooter game played in a first-person perspective. You would choose between playing as 2 cops, Michael Hardy or James Cools. Your task is to take down a powerful crime syndicate called Evil Incorporated.
I know, I heard it too.
Over 3 main stages, which again had different levels of difficulty. You had the Black Arms Market, which was easy, the underground weapon storage, which was medium, and the difficult gang headquarters. Virtua Cop brought many innovations to the light gun genre, such as enemies reacting according to where you shot them on the body,
Help me!
destructible environments, in-game movie action scenes, and shooting enemies through glass. Virtua Cop was the first light gun video game to use 3D flat-shaded polygons. This was an exciting fresh take on the genre that had previously relied on digitized sprites and photographs. The game's targeting system and zoom-in camera were inspired by a commercial for Polka Kilimanjaro coffee, and why not? Virtua Cop became the highest grossing arcade game of 1995 in Japan, and one of America's top 10 best-selling arcade games too. At first, some publications were skeptical of the 3D polygons. Next Generation had said that SEGA were recklessly applying new technology to games that didn't need it, and that Virtua Cop is merely an old game with a new gimmick. They would later revise this opinion, praising its use of 3D polygons. Virtua Cop would go on to get 2 sequels, with Virtua Cop 2 and 3, which were both received favourably. So, AM2 had hit a bullseye with the light gun genre. Would they score big with their next venture? Released in 1994, Virtua Striker is a football game and the first ball-based sports game AM2 would develop. You could choose up to 18 international teams and play in a knockout tournament, similar to that of the World Cup. Virtua Striker was the first football game to use 3D graphics, giving the look and gameplay a level of realism never seen before in a football game. As well as 3D graphics, they gave some of the more famous players in the teams recognisable faces, like Peter Schmeichel for Denmark and Roberto Baggio for Italy, which was pioneering for the time. I like the goal celebrations they would come out with, although a bit confused by this human centipede one. Now, there were a few games that attempted 3D before Virtua Striker, but as you can see, fell short of the mark. AM2 used their camera work skills developed in previous games and applied them to the football genre, making the gameplay more dynamic with zooms and panning. Virtua Striker found huge success in the arcades. Next Generation magazine applauded Virtua Striker as both excellent to play and watch, and noticed the texture mapped players and backgrounds as gorgeous, and gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Virtua Striker will go on to have 3 sequels. The FIFA and Pro Evo games will go on to dominate football games, but Virtua Striker really paved the way for these franchises. The 90s were an exciting time for the evolution of video games. Making the leap from 2D to 3D was no easy task, with many hurdles along the way. The Virtua Games didn't only bring 3D to the mainstream, but did it with style and competency like nothing before it. They weren't the first games to use 3D polygons, but they really captured a gaming audience with their style. These games paved the way for many genres to follow in their footsteps, and influenced such titles as GoldenEye 007, the FIFA titles, Tekken, and Gran Turismo. The AM dev teams would go on to make other 3D innovative games such as Die Hard Arcade and Virtual On, and would focus on action-adventure titles in the early 2000s like Shenmue. Yu Suzuki would go on to create the Shenmue series for the Dreamcast, which gave rise to a new style of action-adventure games. In 2008 he left SEGA after 26 years and created his own development studio, YSNet. He continues to develop video games to this day, and hopes to one day return to the Virtua Fighter series. Toshihiro Nagoshi went on to help develop the Shenmue series with Yu Suzuki. He would go on to work as a subcontractor for Nintendo, helping design F-Zero GX, which sold very well. In 2005 he went on to create the Yakuza series, which was released on PS2. In 2012 he was made Chief Creative Officer at SEGA of Japan, also being put on the board of directors. In 2021, Nagoshi left SEGA after 30 years with the company, and he and several SEGA employees went on to create Nagoshi Studio, which is where he works now. I hope you enjoyed this video on the Virtua Games, guys. I was familiar with all these games, as I'm sure you all were, but didn't realise how influential they would be in the industry. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as it really helps the channel. I'm the Stock Retro Gamer, and I'll catch you in the next one.